The Big Sale Illuminati, where some of the best in the business discuss what's worked, what's working, and what's failed in selling big sales. Our panel of experts includes Clarity Seeker, a black belt of brands, our snarky marketer, Monique de Maio. CEO to CEO selling is his game. Fortune 500 in his lane. The Lex Luthor of the close, Mark Kennedy. The effective executive, a force on the boards, a buyer on fire, Tiffany Olson. David versus Goliath selling, the prince of process, Sun Tzu of big sales strategy, Tom Searcy. And that's your panel. Now it's time to talk about big sales.
Welcome everybody to the Big Sale Illuminati. We have our team together today to talk about CEOs and how to leverage them in the sales process. We have the buyer on fire, Tiffany Olson. We have Lex Luthor of the close, Mark Kennedy, and the snarky marketer, our very favorite Monique. I'm Tom Searcy, the Sun Tzu of sales strategy. I want to talk about CEOs, and we're going to lead up on CEOs. You know, CEOs, when you get in that space between $10 million and $250 million in annual revenues, or all the way up to $500 million in annual revenues, roles of CEOs in the sales process really vary an awful lot. And so if you look at that, where do CEOs play well early in the sales process? Toss ball. Who's got it?
Well, I would say, Tom, on the lower end of that revenue, around 10 million, they are the sales process. They're the ones that are driving it. They're the ones that are using everything that they can to build those sales, most likely because they don't have a head of sales at that point. So if you're in that size of company, you are most likely working directly with that CEO of the company to close those deals. A good place to be. Good place to learn.
Tough place to get stuck, though, right? If you've never managed a sales team or sales leadership team, you're at 10 million, you're trying to get to 100 million. And the only way you know about selling, right, is you are the gold standard, good, bad, or indifferent. So you're right. It's kind of like one of those threshold break points is like maybe 10 million. Monique, what would you say the break point? Is it 10 million or is it bigger than that?
It might be 20, but yeah, definitely 10.
Yeah, 20 is the ceiling for sure. 20 is the ceiling.
So then that's the point at which you have to hand it off to somebody else.
I would say you never fully hand it off to somebody else. So I think that it's really an entire team, especially in those size companies, because you really need to make sure that everyone is working toward increasing that revenue.
I think you're right, especially in big sales. However, I will talk about visibility, because when you become the CEO and you're pitching the deals at that particular level, who becomes the account manager?
Better be well defined ahead of time or you have no one.
Yeah, but trust doesn't transfer well.
Correct.
I mean, the fact is that, so if you're involved all the way through the sales process, no matter what anybody says, you're selling to the biggest executive inside of a big company to land that big deal. Who does that person call? Who's on speed dial for them? The head of sales, the head of engineering? Hell no, it's your phone number. And that's the risk point on the trust transfers. So I have seen this happen again and again to find out, and we work with companies to deal with that idea of the trust transfer. Anybody have a good way that they see the trust transfer happen? Because Tiffany's right on the money. You can't walk away, but you can't be the billboard. You got to step back some. Otherwise, if you don't, right, you're stuck.
I think this is an interesting point. And, when you're on both sides of this, so at times I've been, earlier in my career, I was the salesperson trying to transfer trust to the CEO. And now the roles are reversed. And I think I think back and I'm like, oh my God, I once had a guy, this is how not to do it. In the middle of the sales process, I once had a sales rep literally tell a customer in the middle of kind of like a difficult pilot program, if you knew what you were doing, you wouldn't have hired us. Like that's how you ruin the trust transfer process right there.
And did you get that sale, Mark, or was it, there's the door?
That program did not move to full deployment. Neither did the salesperson come back to the office after that. So that was one. I think another one is, in a different direction. I remember once when I was taking a guy that was new to sales to a pharmaceutical sales call. It was for technology. And I I walked in right before I just made this because I can be a little bit sarcastic, just a little. And I walk in and just before the call, I leaned to the guy and whispered, and I said, "Listen, no matter what you do, just don't fuck it up." And then I walked in and I sit down. And as a rule, I have the 80-20 rule, which is when you're the CEO, you only talk for 20% of the time. You want them to talk 80% of the time. That's the that's the rule of thumb. That's how you transfer trust, is you make them the authoritative figure and you only lean in a little bit. This guy didn't say a word. I had to kick him so hard under the table. It was astonishing.
Did he only say ouch?
Didn't say a word.
But, Mark, I think that's where making sure that those rules are really well defined before you go in is incredibly important. And that takes a little bit of someone who's been around selling and has been in some of those different areas like you, where things that have worked, things that haven't worked. But lining that up ahead of time is so important. Otherwise, it's just kind of a free-for-all once you get in there. Anything can happen and everything will happen.
I think the thing that we talked about last week, which was, this idea of brand and our personal brands and all that stuff. And Mark took a very and I think the word that he used, and I liked it, was orchestrated approach to putting people in the room. I think you have to have that same sensibility with your CEO and your client. So if you know the client's sort of DNA and personality and culture, and your CEO is going to be like the outlier, maybe you want to hesitate to bring him in too early, too fast, too much. But if you think the cultures and the personalities are going to mesh, then have at it. I remember using one of my CEOs because he was an exceptionally good golfer. And I had this one guy who was a total male chauvinist pig. I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? I did. I'm so sorry. Damn. And here I was, early 30s, and I couldn't get time with the guy. I deployed my CEO and I said, I want you to take him to Bedford Country Club in Westchester. Okay. Is that good? And sure enough, things started to happen. They had a lovely little chummy golf game.
I don't know. I think is that CEOs are either toxic, right, or helpful. And they're toxic in two ways. One is that I got a guy named Steve I. Let's just call him that. He was a guy that jumped in. He flew into the meeting late. I got a buyer's table in the room of 7 people on their side, 6 on our side. He shows up the meeting 15 minutes late, right? And it was travel troubles. We've always had him. Everybody's had him at one point. He comes in, he goes, "Hey, everybody, I just got to tell you, I'm really lucky to be alive." And Steve goes on to this whole story about how bad the travel was and the oxygen things went down. And goes into that 15 minutes. And the buyer on the other side says, "That sounds awful. Let's not talk about that anymore." And went right on. Because Steve I was just completely situationally unaware.
Yeah, he had no EQ. No EQ.
No EQ. And then I got another guy who's a CEO named Jim S. Now, Jim S. was one of those guys who was great. He came in, he greeted everybody, he talked to everybody, he remembered everybody's name, and all the rest of it. He'd finish. He'd say, "Okay, I'm going to call you back. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that." And all of a sudden, everything is first person singular about what he's going to do.
Oh, first person singular. That's the toxicity right there.
Exactly. And Jim is wanting to convey what? Commitment. He's wanting to show involvement.
No, he's got an ego the size of a house.
All these personal relationships with people in the meeting. Well, guess what? Jim can't be reached. He's in another freaking sales meeting somewhere else. You can't get to Jim. So at that point, he's had a fantastic sales call and a miserable close.
I think you really, moral of all these stories is you have to know the personalities and you have to be able to control them before the meeting, during the meeting, and after the meeting as much as possible, which means if you need to do damage control after, then that's what you've got to do. But at least if you know it going in, it's only going to help you.
There's one rule I think that is hard and fast, though, about working with CEOs in the sales process. And that is, in order to be a CEO, you have to have 2 different things. You have to have a massive need for control, and you have to have a ton of self-confidence. And when you have those 2 things, the blind spots that you bring into the sales process are that big. I mean, they're enormous. So if you're a salesperson working with a CEO, you have to be able to work around those blind spots. And that's what gets you crushed, because those folks that come into the sales process, they're sure they're right. They're sure their way is going to work. And they're certain that you can't succeed without them.
So how do you, as a salesperson, how do you bring them in?
It's the timing of when you include them. That's how you control them. It's 100% when you bring them in.
So if one is timing, what about how you bring them in? How do you make them knowledgeable of what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing? What
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to jump in right now. It's a process. I'm a process guy. It's a process. So I was that guy. I was that CEO. I know, hard to believe, but I was that CEO. Senior Vice President of Sales Marketing, who I had a lot of personal respect for, said, look, Tom, here's your job. You show up at the very beginning when we're meeting with the senior executive. You convey culture, you convey interest, and you encourage this process to go forward. And then the statement is, you go away. You simply say to everybody, I'm going to keep my eyes on this. Anything I can do to help. We've got a great team. They're going to do a great job. And then at the very end, my job was to come in and declare commitment. We are committed to this. We're very excited about this. I've been watching this progress. I just think it's going to be great. Convey commitment. That was it. The whole sales process, it starts with me, it ends with me, and I'm nowhere in the middle unless something starts to bog down. And I was just taken out to the shed and said, I got good news for you. We're not going to see you much. You're going to start off, you're going to end, that's going to be it. And it was great. It worked really, really well. I had a client, again, this is Rob F. For Mark. I meet with him. I'm a consultant. I come in and I'm going to teach him how to do it. And at some point in there, he says, I'll double your fee if you'll just go on the sales calls. Said, you're going to have to do a little bit better than that. I said, but I'll tell you what, you do better than that. And I will promise you, you will never be in a sales call again. And his salespeople looked at me, honestly, they were lighting candles at the church that this prayer would be answered. And he said, when I said it was double plus and he didn't have to be on a sales call again, he said, done. Because he said, I am, he knew fundamentally he was just danger in a box.
How big was the company?
Well, it was 10 million when I got there, and it was 50 when we stopped working there. They're a great company. They're a great company. They did fantastic work. They grew their accounts and etc. But 0 to 10 included the diagnosis he had that he shouldn't be anywhere in the meetings going forward. He approved all the pricing, and he rewarded all of his sales teams very, very well. But his answer is, I have to stay in the Emerald City. If I don't, I'm going to kill these deals. And I had another person, which was dangerous, another CEO. This is what the problem is when you work with lots of CEOs, who would swoop in at the end to save the deal and absolutely drop their pants on price. Just, we'll get a pilot for you and we'll do it for free. Or I'll guarantee this, 1,000% or whatever, because they were just terrified they were going to lose a deal. So you wind up getting a CEO in there. It's your point, Tiffany. You've got to identify the roles. In my case, I believe it goes in the process. So that the CEO always knows, here's where you are, here's where you're not, here's where you're going to be again. Anybody listening to this podcast has a name on the tip of their tongue of somebody that was one of those types of CEOs. Kennedy's only got 20 names.
We have to protect the innocent. I'll tell you one watch out is we do work with, our target buyer is a, Fortune 500 chief marketing officer. What I found is those folks, like if you want to get those folks' attention, texting is by far the easiest way. Email doesn't work. Getting their executive admin's contact information is essential. Everybody knows that. But if you really need to get their attention, texts work. And there's something about either the intimacy of it in your pocket, the fact that people are trained to pay attention to text. I don't know what it is, but those folks pay attention to it. I've gotten in trouble where I've introduced like peers and whatever into that text string and they get going on it and they lose perspective of the fact that the basis of this relationship is business. Like it gets into these kind of funky areas. So it's one of those ones where it's a best practice because it's Joe Friday, it's just the facts, ma'am. It's here's what's happening. This is what's going to happen next. It's assurance stuff. It's trust stuff, all the stuff Tom's talking about. But I've seen it go too casual and it absolutely can bite you in the ass. So you got to watch the text thing is both a best practice and a weapon that can also be turned on you. So it's one of those kind of crazy things.
Mark, I think you really hit the nail on the head, though, when you said that when you introduced someone else into that text string, then it gets kind of weird because texting is very personal.
Super personal.
And the more people you have on it, it's almost like the less personal it becomes. It becomes like more like a Facebook type thing. So I agree with you that being able to text the one-on-one, really, really powerful, really powerful.
So Monique, I was going to ask you because I know you helped in the past and others, CEOs and sales groups and companies to craft that first presentation or the follow-up materials or whatever. How do you bake a CEO in a way so that they don't just become a terrorist in the meeting, to quote Mark from our last episode?
Typically, I'm trying to, depending on the size of the organization, and I think that's the two variables as far as I'm concerned, we've identified here, size of organization and personality of the CEO. I have a CEO that speaks in the first person on a constant basis. When he's in a room, it's all about him. So that's his blind spot, as Mark would say, right?
Hey, I'm sitting right here. I can hear you.
Yeah, okay, there you go. I wasn't really referring to you, but okay, there it is. But so this guy, I mean, it's all about I, and he loves to save the day. He's got a savior complex like nobody's business. So he loves to sweep in and be like, I saved the deal. I saved the relationship. I'm like, no, you just disempowered your entire goddamn team is what you've done. So there's that. So depending on personality, depending on CEO, I will say, look, you, Joe, you can sell one-to-one. You don't need a presentation. You don't need a deck. You don't need any of this stuff because you show up. You are the DNA of the company. You started the company. You're the founder of the company and you have implied credibility. You don't need anything. What I need you to do is stay on message. So for him, it's coaching on stay on message, not what you were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, however long you've been around, but this is your new personality. Okay. I know I just called your baby ugly, but you need to listen to me because I know what I'm talking about. So the new personality of your baby is now this. This is what I want you to express. So we actually role play. This has to be one-on-one because he can't do it in front of his team because he feels disempowered and then he loses his macho thing and it's a whole nightmare. So you got to do that one-on-one. But with his team, you got to go, look, you can't sell like Joe. So you're going to need some aids. And you have to be careful when you bring Joe in because you know Joe and everybody laughs. Hey, yeah, we know Joe. So it's a whole thing about timing and bringing the Joe in. So there it is.
Yeah. I think, the piece that you're saying right now, it reminds me of a guy that I worked with out in LA, and he was an LA guy, owner of a company, founder of a company, all those kinds of things, and technology based, but he had no understanding. He was so insecure about not having every answer. He walks into an appointment, 45-minute appointment, 5 people with DirecTV, huge marketing opportunity he's going to do in there. He walks in with 88 slides, himself and a note taker. And I'm prepping him for this meeting. I'm saying, you can't take that many slides. Well, it's, you got to understand, they got to have all the information. I said, they don't have the information. Yes, they don't have the time.
Yeah.
Well, there's a bunch of people in the room, so I didn't want to fill up the room with a bunch of our people. And I'm like, I'm going item by item through what I would consider to be the obvious young CEO, LA young CEO.
Oh boy.
Which is a whole different kind of, I got it all in the back pocket and I know how to make a deal happen. But anyway, it's that same problem that you're talking about is how do I carry it? I don't trust anybody to be able to carry 88 slides. And I don't believe that anybody can get our message unless I give the 88 slides.
Yeah, that's death.
Please tell me he didn't go over 88 slides.
Can.
He did.
So what happened when you woke the client up?
I wasn't in the room.
No one was. No one was.
Yeah. This is before people could go ahead and be texting or doing anything. So they're just frozen in time.
I thought they were just sleeping with their eyes open, thinking, you know.
I think everybody was sleeping with their eyes open.
So how do you recover the 88 slide CEO? I mean, Mark's got a good thing. I think you should talk about that, Mark.
Well, the 88 slide CEO, you have to do, that's deep therapy. So I inherited one of those. And one time I was going to pitch the CEO, Artur, what's his last name? Verdois, from the CEO of the Publicis Group. I got recruited to go help in a pitch, and I got on the airplane in JFK, and I said, send me the slide deck, and they send the slide deck, and I start looking, and it's literally like it's 80 slides. So, and I've got a sales ops team back in New York, and we take off, and I start pounding away on the laptop, and I'm like, we need 5 slides. We're going to distill this thing down to nothing. Because, I mean, it's a conversation. I mean, these poor guys, a little bit of empathy with your buyer. If you're selling to a senior executive buyer, they've got that attention span, right?
And you're the fly on the elephant's ass. Like, who cares whatever it is that you're selling?
You have to do something so crazily provocative in the first 30 seconds of that conversation that you need to pull a Tom Searcy. Like, it's the old joke is, I've come here with bags of money. Who's smart enough to pick them up? Get the provocative thing going. And, you just, when you sit there with 76 slides and you're like, well, who's like, I don't know.
I'll tell you, I'm going to tell you how one of my tricks. All right. And that is first of all, you got to prep a CEO. All right. And it's really hard to prep a CEO because their attention spans typically are very, very low. Secondly, they've been successful through winging it enough times that they just think that they can. But if you can get them to prep, the first thing I do is I make them close their deck, right? Close their computer.
Yeah, they will.
And I said, okay, now tell me a story. I go, what do you mean? I said, tell me a story. Tell me what it is that you want to tell me that's in that deck if all the technology broke. And they struggle with it. But I said, this is a story. It's a story. The slides are not the story. The slides are the red in the Red Riding Hood. All right. That's it. So tell me the story. And the thing is that I found changes out the discussion, because then you open up the slides and say, which parts of the slides of this slide list don't tell the story. And you can kill off a lot of slides once they realize that what's important is the story. What's the core issue? You grab their attention up front, you move through it, you get to the end and you say, okay, fine. You could have done that on a plane and you didn't need a deck to do it.
Right. So I would love to hear from Tiffany as a former CEO, like great examples of, people who have pitched you and you're like, yeah, they got it. They understand, they value, they respect who I am and what seat I fill here, or the reverse, like people trying the 78 slide deck and like, how does that land for you and what happens as a result of that? Because I've never been on that well, that's a lie. I've been in that room, but not as a CEO.
So I think one of the things that I wanted to address first, and Tom, you hit it, is the preparation. So for me, the preparation consists of really a 2-pager, 1 page that has the org chart so that I know who the people are, who's in the room, very short bio of the people that I'm going to be speaking with or presenting to. And then the next page is the 1 page on the account. This is what we've done. Here's our objective. Here's what we want to accomplish. When we go in the room, we want to walk out of the room with whatever it is, whatever part of the sale that we're in. And once I have that understanding, then I can really know what role to fill, whether we have slides or not. I think the big thing is if somebody is going through too many slides, I don't have a problem saying, you want to know what? Can we jump to whatever part, or can we get through this section in the next couple of minutes? Good people will figure out that they need the next couple of minutes. Someone who's maybe more nervous, all of a sudden now it's another, 20 minutes before they can move there, and they've already lost people. So I think the best is very fast preparation, a little, kind of 1 pager with the org of these folks, little bios. And I think most people are really good to go. Tell them what they need to do. Tell them what the objective of the meeting is. And that to me is a well-oiled machine.
I've had a chance to watch Tiffany pitch. I've had a chance to work with her as she was taking over a sales team. One of my favorite story pieces was she asked them to go ahead and provide their standard deck. All right. As a presentation, she said, because we're going to go to a meeting and I need to be prepped and I want to be very clear what my job is. She took a grass whip to 85% of the slides. It was just like they go to a slide. She'd say get rid of that one. Get rid of that. She wouldn't even let people start to pitch it. Stupid, no good. Don't include that. Not valid.
I was a lot nicer than that, Tom.
I was there. It's possible that I was that. And Tiffany was like, okay, Tom's right, but I think he wants a different tone. Anyway, the point being was she grass whipped this thing. And she said, and then at the end of it, which I thought was really great, she said, I need to know this, this, and this. And she started off with, what is the objective of this meeting? And it was simple. Oh, well, we just want to move it along. Really? Why am I going to move it along meeting? Can't you move it along on your own? Or is this an informational meeting? Do I need to be there? Is there a decision that's going to be made? Yes. All right. So for having seen that, what she's talking about, I think is really, really valid as it relates to personal behaviors. And I always loved the fact that she would start off with her team. And what she did was she trained them to say, I'm going to go meet with Tiffany. You damn well better have a clear objective of something that's going to happen at the end of this meeting. Whether you're going to buy, sell, exit, make a change or a choice. Otherwise, I'm not going. And she was great at that. No, she was that kind of CEO. There's different kinds of CEOs. She's technically credentialed and she's in a very tight space. I mean, what are the different kinds of CEOs they're out there? Because it sounds like different ones would handle it. That's how she would handle it. Kennedy would handle it differently. The other, the good old boys. By the way, I'm not sure if you're aware of it. I find macho to be triggering.
Macho is so triggering for me. I
know. And no, the fact that I'm triggered. Okay. I feel a little bit like maybe you've taken me to a very uncomfortable place. But before that.
Did you just say macho is triggering?
Yes. Yeah. When she said that, and immediately I shut down. I couldn't go forward.
Stop it. Tell us about these types of CEOs.
I want to see the CEOs, Mark. What do you got?
I think there's 5 types. And we talk about the sales process. I think how you use your CEO depends on what are the color of their stripes. So I think there's 5 types. I'll run down through and we can talk about them. The first one is, it's the classic small company CEO, and that's the rainmaker. So it's the person and the thing about it is to be fair to small company CEOs, you can't really have a company unless the CEO is a rainmaker for the most part.
That's right.
It's correct. It's just an absolute mandatory requirement. And there's a $10 to $20 million threshold on those folks. If they can't evolve, that's where they are. And you could do perfectly well doing that. The second one after the rainmaker is what I call the technical wizard. The tech wizard this is very prevalent in engineering-based organizations, software-based organizations. They're the smartest technical person in the room. They built a product at some point along the line, and they had to be involved in the sale of it. The third one is the Gordon Gekko, which is God's gift to finance. So it's the smartest finance guy that runs one of those efficient organizations, and they squeeze every ounce of blood out of everything that they do and everyone around them. And so there's 2 more. That's God. So you got the rainmaker, the tech wizard, God's gift to finance. Next is Perry Mason. So for those people that are younger, Perry Mason's a lawyer, and every organization, like every 10 organizations has one guy or gal that's running it that's a lawyer, and it's a pain in the ass. They're almost as bad as the finance people, but they're sure that they're more right, and they're probably disappointed that they didn't get into medical school. And then the last one is the pervasive one, which is the founder/visionary. The visionary, right? Oh my God, the visionary CEO. So each one of those is uniquely different for how you use them in the sales process. Let's start with the rainmaker. How do you guys think about the rainmaker in the sales process? You're a salesperson and you've got a rainmaker CEO. You've got a deal on the hook. How do you use them?
Close.
To close.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Give them close for you. That's where they live. That's what they love.
So I think you have to be careful. I think there's some nuance to the close. I think if you've got the rainmaker, you bring them in after a successful pilot when things have to go big. Like when you're ready to really go big and it's the first gigantic upsell, I think that's when the rainmaker gets going. I think that's where you use that person to your best effectiveness.
I would say this much about the rainmaker. One of the things I coach people on, you don't let a person like that go anywhere alone.
No.
They always have to have a wing person there, take the notes. operationalize what's going to happen, record the commitments.
Oh, yeah.
So Rainmakers are really powerful, but they have to have the support person with them.
They're like plutonium, very powerful, but they can also kill you.
Yeah, right.
Retained, right.
All right. What about your tech wizards? What do you do with your tech wizard CEO? When do you bring them into a sales process?
Oh, I think in the beginning, when you want to set the vision and be like, oh, we have the best tech in the world, and then the guy gets off on the bits and bytes and getting everybody excited about the whole solution. I would say.
I think the tech really adds credibility. So if someone, I've been in healthcare. So for me, the tech wizard is the scientist, the researcher, and they can add such incredible credibility to what's going on, what the product is or the service is, that I really find them in that role extremely helpful.
So is that beginning, or you'd say beginning too, Tiffany?
I would say beginning. And then if the sale gets broader, more people that really want to understand either the technical piece, the scientific piece, whatever that may be, that is where they absolutely shine.
With Tiffany, I'd expand on that. If you build a sales process out, it starts off the first one where you've qualified, agreed to, and shaped what the offer is. And you got a CEO or senior executive who's excited at it. The invitation is to connect to what we would call like the discovery meeting or the scoping meeting. That's where the CEO shows up on a technical style, because you make certain that the other person is bringing their technical people, and now you're credentialed. But it's early in the game, but the CEO doesn't always necessarily need to know every bit and byte, but they need to know every bit and byte. Then they bring their bit and byte person in.
I agree with that. I think it's a two-step dance almost always. There's a business win and there's a technical win. And if you've got someone that is a serious, heavy technical, especially if they're like published, they're well known, you bring them in the middle during that technical win process that deepens the offering after you've gotten a business win in place. I think that's absolutely best practice right there. And then you get them out, because from that point forward, it's going to be iterations and new ideas. And the problem is when they start talking about like technical depth, the scope goes like this when you're trying to go like that to get to a closure.
I call that watercolor selling. It's so dangerous because what happens is we get everybody in the room and we start to talk about all the what ifs, and we start to paint the walls with the what ifs, instead of focusing down what's the first purchase. And so they get so excited about all this, and we could do this and we could rewrite Microsoft, because let's just agree, it's just crap. So Microsoft needs to be rewritten. And at the end of this, right, we smoke the peace pipe, and at the end, and there isn't a deal.
Right.
Yeah, the economics blow up. And that's a perfect transition to the next one. How about Gordon Gekko? When do you bring in God's gift of finance in the sales process?
I love selling money. I love selling money. If the language is money, and I've got a Gekko guy who understands how to talk the language of money in their terms, you are looking at sex on a cracker. That is going to happen.
So when do you bring him in?
Not all analogies work. Sex on a cracker might not work for you.
Yeah, no, I mean,
it ain't all caviar. Let's tell you that. But
there's so many places I could go.
I know it's. Let's go back. Listen, come on, Monique, you're taking this off.
Reel it in there, Tom. Gordon Gekko, finance guy. When do you bring him in?
You bring him in early. Listen, I've had the privilege of being on two teams who pitched to Walmart. All right. Who in every conversation will beat you to death with the privilege that you get for working for Walmart.
Sounds like BMW.
And their answer is, you should give us your margin because we're free advertising.
Yeah.
Right? So you bring in a finance person, your CFO style CEO comes in and picks apart where the margin is on all the segments along the way and says, all right, that's a cost of goods sold. We can't get rid of this. Cost of goods sold, we can't get rid of. And they walk them all the way through. And at the end, they say, look, you're wasting all this money along the way. At my price right now, you make more money than not. And how do they do it? Not through operational conversation, although they understand it. They pick apart every single dollar along the way. They're talking it. They're getting. Look, at a Walmart conversation, you won't have a Walmart conversation if there isn't somebody from purchasing, procurement, or the CFO. They just don't do it.
Yeah.
All right. So it's that kind of organization. It's and there's a lot of them out there.
And Tom, is that the first meeting? Is that the second? Is that the close meeting? Is that when you're getting closer to the close?
Great question. It's the second meeting on. You wind up with an organization like that. you wind up with that person in every meeting. Unfortunately, you just don't let them go alone.
Yeah.
And actually, they kind of strip off after a while. It's interesting. You wind up with parallel processes with the money CEO, CFO guys talking, right? And the rest of the operationalized guys, they wind up being in separate meetings. You'll see people drop out of meetings. There are those people, and then they'll reschedule meetings with just a smaller group. And you've seen this happen. Money people start to talk to money people while everybody else in the room is just yawning.
I agree. I don't think Gordon Gekko creates relationships. I think they make trades. And if you can set the trade up early in the game and let the team run with it, I think that's better. Let's do. What about Perry Mason? When do you get Perry Mason, the lawyer, involved?
Never. Did I say never? I'm sorry.
It's funny. That's exactly what I put in my notes. I'm like, never.
We just had literally the other day, my partner was delivering a new messaging, positioning, and strategy for a financial services company. And sure enough, Perry Mason shows up. It's like, no, we should say this about that. So he's like, you know what? You really didn't need me for this process. It's fine. Really. You added no value to the equation whatsoever. It's not based on any research, any competitive set. It's just like what you want to spew out of your left ear. Perry Mason was at large and in charge the other day here.
They even mess up the T's and C's at the end because they feel like they have to, like, especially when you're dealing with a big company, they want to argue big company T's and C's, which are inherently skewed against you.
Please. Anyway, so how do you deal with him?
It's easy. You just keep them as far away as you can.
Yeah, because they really just don't know when to say that's enough, because they'll just keep on pushing all the way down. And then sometimes it's down and out the door.
My approach to CEOs like this, in the sales process, is you have to tell them, I want to keep you behind the curtain. I don't want to show you too early. I need to, which is a nice way of saying, stay the hell out of the process until we've got the deal done. But you do need to have the velvet hammer behind the curtain at some point. And when the CEO is there, you've lost all of your negotiating power.
Yeah.
And they are so excited about getting a deal done that they start to fall into the trap of being the salesperson who will agree to everything.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, it's painful. All right, we got one more of these that you said.
Yeah, the founder and visionary, and they could be one and the same, and it could be different. So how do you use that person?
I go back to the idea from the very beginning that I had said, you bring them in at the beginning, they talk about they talk about their idea of commitment, collaboration, energy, and enthusiasm. And then you bring them in at the end, which is the point where we close and declare commitment.
I think there's a nuance to what you just said. And the nuance is, and this is what I definitely do, I bring them in and use them before there's a deal.
Is that good or bad?
No, absolutely good, because it sets the table for what might come. But if you start and they get attached to the deal, you'll never get them out.
Because he's visionary, so you want him to see like big picture, kind of set the stage and possibility. And then
I want them above the fray. They have to be above the fray, especially if they're that founder visionary and they've never been a CEO anywhere else. Because that's what you can tell. If you put somebody that's a founder and a CEO, those two things are they go together because you're the founder, but there's a lot of nuance there. I mean, that's where you can get into real trouble.
This is where you've got Silicon Valley, right?
Yes.
Because Silicon Valley, most of them are quants who came out of, really, really good schools, huge brains. What they want to do is in their position, they're best at pitching private equity, venture capital, going public. They know how to talk that quant language.
Yeah.
When you go down to the other level, they're not as effective. They're not very good at it. Okay. I want to wrap this up on this. What kind of sales CEO are you, or have you been, that you want to be just completely honest about how you are? Mark sucks, so go ahead and talk about it. Mark's laughing right now.
Well, Mark's already laughing.
Well, at my worst, I've been a little bit of all of these things at times. I would say my default is the rainmaker, and it's taken every amount of psychological counseling, medication to learn to be able to be the first guy in the door, hand it off, show up at, it's organizational commitment, right? That's what I aspire to do. And at my worst, it's just grab the reins and drag the whole thing through. So yeah, I would say I default to the rainmaker as my default bad behavior. But I as Danny Noonan once said in Caddyshack, I want to be good.
This is where we lost our audience as far as movie references. I want to know, where would you put yourself at, Tiffany?
I would say that on my bad side, it's because I like to be too efficient. I don't like to waste time. And so sometimes you can move things along faster than they should be moved along. And that's what I'm trying to recover from.
CEO in recovery. We should coin that.
I'm in a step program with this.
Let's get to yes or no, not maybe and later. I got it. Monique, what do you got?
Well, as CEO, I only have Rainmaker, unfortunately. That's all I got. As working with CEOs, I have a bunch of these people.
I've been all these guys as well. Not proud of it. But I would say early on, you're the rainmaker, as has been stated all in this meeting. You're the rainmaker by nature, and you also have a tendency to be founder or visionary. My role, as it was most recently, was more of that: generate the interest, get ready for the commitment, and step away from pricing and closing. Because pricing and closing, I had somebody who was better at pricing and closing at margin than I was. Because why? Because I wanted the deal.
Right.
And so I had to separate myself out. So the last part of it was energy and excitement and commitment. They'd say, how much is it going to cost? I said, the pricing part of that, we handle that separately. And I look at the other CEO, I go, and I'm sure you do too. And all of a sudden, we took that off the table. And pricing and closing went to somebody else who was just better at it.
Love it.
Yeah. So closing thoughts. Anybody on this one to close out our conversation about CEOs and leveraging them in the sales process?
I would say don't let it happen by chance. You've got to control it.
That's great comment. What else?
I found 10 CEOs of publicly held companies that came out of sales and marketing. That was kind of fun.
That's good.
Yeah.
There's 500 of them, though.
Yeah.
No stripes. Which one are you dealing with? Watch out for the blind spots.
CEOs should be salt and pepper. They're not steak.
Ooh, say that again.
I said CEOs are salt and pepper. They should not be steak. The sales process should have its own weight and value. Salt and pepper is what's going to go ahead and add the flavor to it. Good episode, everybody. Have a good couple of weeks. Great to see everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Big Sale Illuminati podcast. If you like this episode, give us a thumbs up and let us know in the comments. Also, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Until our next episode, best wishes on your big sales.